Hi, this is the voice, Michael Chavello. You're listening to the Premium Oddscast, hosted by leading MMA odds maker Nick Kalikas, fight scientist and author of Fightnomics Reed Kuhn, and MMA journalist Brian Hemminger. The absolute best UFC betting info, picks, statistics, and analysis from the most respected authority in mixed martial arts betting, MMAOddsBreaker.com.
Welcome to the Premium Oddscast, presented by 5 Dimes. I'm Brian Hemminger, joined today by leading mixed martial arts odds maker Nick Kalikas to break down this Saturday's UFC 177 event, which takes place in Sacramento, California. Now, if you're unfamiliar with our format, myself and Nick will be breaking down the fight card from top to bottom, providing extensive analysis and a pick for each fight after doing our film study for the event. Then, fight scientist Reed Kuhn will step in and offer his expansive numerical insight on all bouts with sufficient data. Today, Reed will be able to contribute on 3 total bouts. Now, also pay attention to our MMAOddsBreaker.com staff picks article, which comes out late in the week, usually following the weigh-ins, because sometimes we will change our picks depending on further analysis, any updates in the news, or how fighters look at the weigh-ins, or if they come in overweight or anything. Now, briefly looking back at the last event, our premium package bets for UFC Fight Night 48 and UFC Fight Night 49 went 2-1 overall to win 3.375 units. We won our underdog play on Talisladis and our parlay on Colby Covington and Jordan Meehan, but we did lose our underdog play on Valmir Lazaro. We also lost a free bet on Tony Martin for 2 units. Now back to the present. UFC 177 features a 10-fight card in total and will be aired on pay-per-view this Saturday night. Let's dive right in. Now, kicking things off will be a lightweight contest featuring a pair of UFC newcomers on UFC Fight Pass. It'll be Chris Wade, who is 7-1, taking on Cain Carrizosa, who is 6-0. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened Wade minus 140, the comeback on Carrizosa, even money, and looking over at 5 Dimes right now, Wade is minus 125, the comeback is plus 105 on Carrizosa. So line basically got a little bit tighter again, and two-way support coming in on these guys here. Now, as far as fight goes, this is a pretty good matchup. Both of these guys, I think, deserve to get their opportunity in the UFC lightweight division. Both of them have potential to make some waves, no doubt about it, and both of them are definite fighters. So starting off with Carrizosa first, the guy's more of your finishing type of fighter. By that being said, I mean, he's definitely has some skill on the feet. He's capable of knocking you out. He's got a versed attack on the feet. He's got some long limbs to go along with it. So he could definitely be an awkward matchup for most to stand and bang with the guy. But not just that, but once the fight gets to the floor, the guy has a lot of submission skill to go along with it. So he could beat you off his back. He likes to get top position, drop ground and pound. He has good transitions and reversals. And, I mean, he just goes for it off his back. He likes to go for that armbar, triangle chokes, and that kind of attack as well. And the guy's a finisher, no doubt. He's got that kind of killer instinct and seems to work out for him more times than not. But against Wade, I think he's going to kind of have a difficult time. Wade is one of these guys. He's a solid, well-rounded fighter in his own right. He's more of a grinder, like a wrestling background. He's improving his stand-up. It's not too bad. He does like to push forward. He has a ton of chin and heart, but he's not going to be as technical as Carrizosa on the feet. But I still think his pressuring style will really pose a lot of problems for Carrizosa. I think Wade is going to end up getting top position. If any weakness in Carrizosa, it has been that he's been put on his back. I mean, look at the film out there on him, and he's been put on his back more times than not in almost every fight. So Wade is, again, with that wrestling, grinding type of style, he's got pretty good offensive wrestling. I think he can and is capable of getting this fight to the floor. And once he's on the floor, again, he looks to control. He has good ground and pound. He is capable of finishing by submission as well. He's not as dangerous as Carrizosa, though, in that aspect of the game. He's more of a grinder decision type of fighter. So how I think this kind of plays out is that Wade's going to push forward, kind of weather the storm on the feet a little bit, get inside, take Carrizosa down, and look to, again, control and smother him a little bit and grind out a decision win here. So I do believe Wade is going to get the job done. Both these guys got a lot of potential, but I think Wade is a little bit ahead of Carrizosa, especially how they match up right now. I think the wrestler is going to do what he does best and just control and dictate the pace of the fight. So my pick is going to be Wade.
And I'm in agreement here. While I do think that Carrizosa is the more dangerous fighter in terms of finishing ability, I mean, his last fight was just 30 seconds before he scored a knockout, and he's a pretty solid submission fighter overall. He has atrocious takedown defense. I mean, it's not just bad, it's really bad. And it's crazy considering he actually came from, he has a bit of a wrestling background, but he does not showcase that one bit in his fights. His offensive wrestling really isn't much. He usually uses Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu trips to set up takedowns if he ever wants to be in top position. And Wade, on the other hand, is almost exclusively a wrestler. The guy is okay on the feet, nothing special, pushes forward, but almost everything he does sets up to get inside, shoot in for a takedown. Now, Wade isn't the greatest wrestler, although he is he is the wrestling coach at Dennis Bermudez's gym in Long Island, so I mean, he clearly knows what he's doing, but he's not the most explosive guy. Sometimes he won't finish the takedown, they'll end up in the clinch and just suck against the fence until they get broken up. But when he turns the corner, when he actually gets the double leg and completes it, he does a very good job of staying in top position, dropping some ground and pound, advancing position, and then while he isn't the best finisher out there, he can finish the fight, although most of the time he does win decisions with his wrestling. The main thing that I'm worried about in this fight is what's going to happen with Carrizosa. Is he going to be able to keep this fight standing? Probably not. And then once he does get it to the ground, is his chain submission game going to be able to work? And again, for me, probably not. He's very active off his back. He works for arm bars. He works for triangle chokes. But Wade is very heavy. He's got good hips. He does a really good job of maintaining top control. And honestly, the way I see this fight playing out is Carrizosa winging some punches early in the beginning of every round. And if he doesn't knock Wade out, I see Wade taking him down repeatedly and staying on top. And the only way Carrizosa is going to get up is if the fight gets stood up by the referee. So my pick's going to be Chris Wade as well. Now, dropping down to the bantamweight division, we have another pair of UFC newcomers in former Bellator champion Joe Soto, who is 15-2 overall, taking on MFC champion Anthony Birchak, who is 11-1. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Great fight. I opened Soto minus 125, the comeback on Birchak minus 115, so virtually a pick 'em with a very, very slight lean towards Soto. And this is another spot where a lot of the general action out there has been split and the line's staying steady. Right now, Soto is minus 120, comeback on Birchak is even money. Man, this is another fight that I've been bouncing back and forth on. Both these guys, I mean, their best attribute is definitely the ground game. I mean, both of these guys are capable on the feet. They got knockout power for sure. But their strength is not really standing and banging too much, even though I think with their ground games kind of neutralize each other out here, I think we could see a lot of that take place. But still, more times than not, I believe that these guys are going to get into grappling exchanges and they're going to go back and forth, transition with top position, transition to each other's back. I mean, these guys are definitely more than capable grapplers in finishing the fight by sub, more so than knockout. And I think we're going to see a barn burner. I think we're going to see probably a close decision, competitive decision if it does hit the scorecards. If there's a finish, I think it's probably going to be Birchak unless he ends up getting his back taken, and Soto is very good at just sinking in that rear naked choke. Both these guys are for sure. But I think that Birchak has kind of a better chance of ending this fight by knockout. Soto has been knocked out in the past. He's been rocked in the past before. He's made mistakes on the ground as well. And I mean, Birchak's been kind of sub as well. So both these guys have a little bit of flaws as far as kind of losing position sometimes on the ground and getting themselves in dangerous spots. But what bothers me the most, I guess, I think Soto, I give the slight edge to Soto across the board here pretty much, but that chin does stand out and it does bother me a little bit because, I mean, he kind of, been looking bad at times with that. So I know he's been on a run again, and that's why he kind of made it his, UFC debut, and he made the UFC because he's kind of leveled off and he's been a little bit more consistent with his performances, and the guy's definitely talented at what he does. So I think if he does not get knocked out, he probably will end up grinding out a very, very close, tight decision here. So I'm going to lean slightly towards Soto, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Birchak does pull this fight off. Birchak's a very capable, talented fighter. I mean, he's excited to make his UFC debut. And again, these guys have a lot of similarities here. In fact, Birchak's going to have a little bit of a size advantage, I believe, over Soto. But as far as pure strength goes, I mean, they're both going to be pretty close and on par as well. So across the board, this is a great fight because they match up so well together. But early on, my slight lean is going to be Soto. Again, stay tuned to the MMA Oddsbreaker staff picks on the website on MMAOddsBreaker.com because that could very well easily change after weigh-ins. But for right now, early on, I am going to lean towards Soto.
Yeah, and this is another very evenly matched fight. Both these guys are extremely talented, former champions, former multi-time champions for Soto. He was the Bellator champion. He's now the Tachi Palace reigning champion. And this is just a really tricky fight to call. Both of them are very evenly matched because their skill sets are similar. Birchak is extremely aggressive in terms of stand-up. He's not the most technical guy, but he just pushes forward, looks for opportunities to just land big shots. And both guys are very good on the ground. I mean, that's where their strengths really are. Soto has very good offensive grappling. He's got solid ground and pound. He can finish fights on the canvas with his submissions and with ground and pound. While Birchak, he's durable, he pushes forward, he does occasionally give up position on the ground. He will lose occasional scrambles. That is a bit of a concern, especially against a good wrestler like Soto. And, but Birchak, he just hangs in there. He's got a ton of heart. You don't really see him ever getting finished or in big trouble against guys. And, another thing about Birchak is, he gets in these type of barn burner fights. He loves getting in fun, wild, crazy fights. And if he can sucker Soto into more of a brawl type fight, that's to his advantage. Because I think Soto is a little bit more technical, in terms of his offensive grappling. He's a little more measured on the ground. He paces himself a little bit better. And then on the feet, Soto is a little bit better footwork, a little bit better technique, a little bit better defense. But the way that Birchak can neutralize that is basically to drop his hand, be a little crazy. And Soto does not have a great chin. We've seen multiple times he's been cracked on the chin. He's gotten in big trouble. Obviously Joe Warren knocked him out in Bellator when he lost the title, but when he won the Tachi title, he got cracked in the first round and second round early and had to be in survival mode a little bit. So on the feet, while Soto is the more technical fighter, I think Birchak could definitely hold his own there, and he could definitely hurt him on the feet. And on the ground, again, these guys are going to be very evenly matched. It's going to be some fun scrambles, good exchanges, but I do see Soto getting top position and being the superior wrestler. So I do give Joe Soto a slightly better advantage on the ground and on the feet. So I'm going to lean Joe Soto in this fight. But, I would not be surprised if Anthony Birchak pulls this out because he just has that ability to win fights. He's been in a lot of really entertaining, exciting fights. He takes big risks, and they could pay off here, but my pick is going to be Joe Soto, at least for now. Now moving all the way up to the heavyweight division, we have Ruan Potts, who is 8-2, taking on Anthony Hamilton, who is 12-3. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
Hamilton opens -210, the comeback on Potts +160, and over line at 5 dimes right now, it's Hamilton -200 +170, so another spot where the line got a little bit tighter. And again, kind of steady, smaller type of action coming in. I mean, I don't blame people out here for not really being gung-ho about betting this fight. I mean, it's a tough one because both these guys are barely, in a lot of ways, UFC level. I mean, they both have a lot of flaws in their game. I mean, one of them that's pretty obvious to me is the chins in both of these guys as well. Hamilton, I mean, he's only officially been knocked out once, but if you look throughout his career, he's been rocked on several occasions as well. Potts, I mean, he just got knocked out for the first time, but it was against Palele, which was from ground and pound, and he was out cold, so that's kind of scary as well. Palele definitely has some power, but the way it kind of all went down was pretty surprising. Now, as far as skill set goes, I think Hamilton is the more complete fighter. I think he's a little bit better everywhere. While pure submission skills, I mean, I do have to give the advantage to Potts, so I should backtrack a little bit and rephrase that. I think Potts is definitely the more capable submission fighter, but as far as control goes, I mean, Potts does give up his the takedown quite a bit, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Hamilton get on top of him and land some ground and pound. But not just that, if it stays upright, I mean, Potts does have some power, and he swings a little wild at times, and I wouldn't be shocked if he clips Hamilton or something on the feet, but more times than not, I think Hamilton can do a little bit more damage on the feet as well. So if Hamilton does not get caught by submission, and Potts is more well known for his guillotine choke, he's pretty nasty with that. And you know what, more times than not, I got to give him a little bit of credit because Potts is able to transition from out of the bottom to the top position throughout his career, he's had pretty good scrambling ability like that. So Hamilton has to maintain top control and be careful that Potts doesn't reverse on him, because if he does, Potts has some devastating ground and pound in his own right. But I do think it's Hamilton's fight to win or lose here. I think he, again, could probably get top position if he wants. I think on the feet, if he uses some movement a little bit, he's a big guy, doesn't move very well, but I think he can still avoid Potts and probably, dictate the punishment a little bit more so and kind of put it on him a little more. So I got to pick Hamilton, but this is a spot where I would not honestly recommend a bet either way. Both these guys are barely UFC level, like I said, so you can't have confidence in fighters like this in the UFC, to be honest with you. So that's where I stand. I think Hamilton is probably going to get the W, though.
Yeah, I'm in agreement that, neither of these guys are really UFC caliber. Potts got absolutely crushed in his UFC debut, and Hamilton didn't look much better. Both of them got finished in the first round. They're also up there in age. Potts is 36, Hamilton's 34, although heavyweights do tend to last a little bit longer. And, the only thing really that Hamilton has going for him is I think he's a lot bigger, so he's going to have some serious size advantage. And he does train out of better gyms. He does work at Jackson's MMA, where at least half of the time, where he's working alongside Andrei Arlovsky and Travis Brown and John Jones and all those guys. So you would think that would rub off a little bit, and it did to the point where, he was able to win the MFC title. But I don't know how much that's going to help him in terms of a UFC quality heavyweight competition. Thankfully, Ruan Potts is not a UFC caliber guy. He's pretty on the small end of the heavyweights, and he's just not very good on the ground. He's not very good on the feet. He's got a little bit of pop in his hands, but he's been beating up guys in the South African League up until this point. And, it was obvious in his UFC debut against Soa Palele, who was not a very good heavyweight in his own right, that, he was just not ready. Now, if Hamilton knows what's best for him, he's probably just going to either put Potts in the clinch or take him down and get on top of him and just beat him up. But Potts is going to be quicker. He's going to be able to move around a lot better. Hamilton does not have very good striking defense. Alexei Olenek was actually beating him up on the feet before he got that submission. Potts could potentially outmaneuver Hamilton on the feet and wear him down a little bit. Although Hamilton has gone the distance, I think he went 5 rounds in his last MFC title fight. So I'm not really worried about his conditioning. The main thing here is, can Anthony Hamilton use his size and power against Potts and put him away? Because obviously Potts got knocked out cold in his last fight, and Hamilton does have some power. He looked really good when he initially won the title, so he's dangerous with some kicks if he lands them, and if he can get Potts on the ground or in the clinch, he could put him away there. So I'm going to pick Anthony Hamilton, not confidently, because neither of these guys are that big of a threat in the heavyweight division, but Anthony Hamilton should probably come through here. Now, moving on to a feature undercard bout, we have Scott Jorgensen, who is 15-9, taking on UFC newcomer Henry Cejudo, who is 6-0. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
I opened Cejudo minus 185 to come back on Jorgensen plus 145. Right now, the line is minus 160 for Cejudo. The comeback is plus 140. So another spot where line just basically tightened up a little bit. And I wasn't quite sure which way the general action would come in, so line staying steady. I think a lot of people kind of respect Cejudo coming in his UFC debut. And of course, the general MMA public out there has always had strong support for Jorgensen, and they respect what he's accomplished throughout his career, because he's fought the who's who at 135. I know this is at 125, but the guy's been in there with the best fighters, and he's been more than competitive and handled his own while he's been in the octagon with them. So Jorgensen has been in the Zuffa Association, I should say, for a while now, and he's performed pretty well. So this is a very complicated a tough out to come into facing Jorgensen in your UFC debut. But if anybody can handle it, it's a guy like Cejudo. Of course, Cejudo has that Olympic wrestling background that most of us know about. So he's tremendous when it comes to grappling and just dictating the control and pace of the fight. But more so than that, I'm not going to really get into his wrestling too much, because that kind of stuff speaks for himself. He's an Olympic gold medalist and whatnot. So that kind of says enough right there, but it's his improvements on the feet and his, where he is at overall in his MMA career at this point. I was expecting Cejudo to kind of be a little raw still on the feet and not have too much to offer and just kind of want to close the distance, get the fight to the floor and work his ground and pound, work some submissions and stuff like that. But you know what? He's more than capable of finishing people on the feet as well. And he's a little bit ahead of, I think, where he should be at this point of his career on the feet. So that tells you how talented of an athlete Cejudo is. I mean, the guy really, I think, will be, even if this fight stays standing against Jorgensen, and Jorgensen, again, he's got that wrestling background in his own right. He's a well-rounded skill set type of fighter, but I think he's more known kind of to most of us as for his striking. I mean, the guy could definitely stand and bang, but I think he's not even going to be able to pick Cejudo apart that much on the feet. I think it's going to be very competitive on the feet. I think you've got to give the wrestling edge, of course, to Cejudo on the ground, even though the grappling exchanges should be pretty fun. So I really do believe that Cejudo is going to come in to his debut and defeat Jorgensen, which is going to be a huge win for him, making his UFC debut. So, no matter where the fight takes place, I think Cejudo is going to be pretty game.
And I'm in agreement. I think, there are some questions concerning Cejudo, but I think that Scott Jorgensen is, the right type of opponent to throw in there. Jorgensen has tremendous experience against some of the best fighters in the world at 125 and 135 pounds, especially 135. But, you gotta look at it realistically, and he's on a pretty steep decline right now. The guy, at one point, he fought for the bantamweight title against Dominic Cruz. I think that was the last fight in WC history, but ever since then, he just really hasn't been able to put it together. He beats the people he's supposed to beat, but, when he steps in there against the top level guys, he's been losing, and then lately, he's been losing in pretty violent fashion. Ever since Eddie Wineland knocked him out, he's been getting hurt repeatedly on the feet. And even in his last fight against Danny Martinez, a guy that's, isn't the most technical striker and just kind of throws haymakers on the feet, Jorgensen was getting blasted. He almost got finished. So I think, you really got to watch out for the chin of Scott Jorgensen. It's definitely not going to get any better. And he's 31 years old, so, especially as a flyweight, you get in your 30s as a flyweight, that's a little tricky. And Cejudo, man, on the feet, he's nothing great. He's got that amateur background in the boxing, but, where he's super dangerous is the canvas. Cejudo is obviously the gold medal winner in the Olympics. That's a huge deal, a tremendous accomplishment, and still young. A lot of these guys that were great wrestlers that transitioned to MMA, they do it when they're older. But, he's still just 27 years old, and he's been competing and training in MMA for a while now. When he gets on top of you, you're in big trouble. Finished most of his early fights, although he wasn't quite able to do that as he stepped up the competition level on the regional scene. So, I would be more expecting Cejudo to win a decision if he does win this fight. Now, there are a couple causes for concern with Cejudo. He missed weight pretty bad recently and then he's been dropping out of fights left and right, claiming injury, claiming other things. So, I'm not quite sure where his head is at. There were people that claimed that he was having, emotional issues and stuff when he tried out for the Olympics the last time. So, that is he's still got a little bit of that immaturity factor going. So, a lot of people still question, how much he really wants this. So we're going to find out a lot about Henry Cejudo in this UFC debut, but I think he comes through, and I think he pulls off probably a decision victory here over Scott Jorgensen. So my pick is Henry Cejudo. Now moving up to the middleweight division, we have Lorenz Larkin, who is 14-3 with 1 no contest, taking on Derek Brunson, who is 11-3. Now Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
Larkin opens -140. The comeback on Brunson, even money. And right now, looking over at 5 dimes, the line actually flipped. It's now Brunson -120, Larkin's even money. So line got a little bit tighter again. And Brunson, the very, very slight favorite here. And this is a tough fight. I mean, I'm going back and forth on it myself, to be honest with you. Brunson's best attributes is of course his grappling, his wrestling, his ability to control and dictate the pace of the fight. His stand-up continues to improve. He's very long. He's going to have, I believe, a 6-inch reach advantage. So even on the feet, he's more than capable of doing damage. But that's typically not his game plan against other strikers. I mean, he looks to take the fight to the floor, work his ground and pound, work his control, work his submission game. So he's going to have that advantage over Larkin for sure in this fight. But Larkin's takedown defense continues to improve. I mean, he's fought a lot of decent wrestlers throughout his career at this point. And of course, the striking edge has to go to Larkin. He's far more technical. I think he's got a little bit better knockout power. I know he struggled recently with his striking defense, especially in that firefight that he just had with Philippou. That was crazy. And he hasn't really looked as good at 185, Larkin, recently. So it's a tough one for me, because it's going to really come down to if Brunson can control the pace without gassing too. I should bring that up, because one big concern about Brunson is, of course, he's going to look good early in the fight, but every fight, if you look at his footage, by the third round, the guy's exhausted and he's just trying to, almost survive and finish the decision, to get the decision win or finish the fight. So that does scare me a little bit, because Larkin has good enough cardio that in the third round he could definitely be dangerous. And if Brunson, his defense gets a little bit sloppy, can't get those takedowns, and Larkin steps it up a little bit, I could definitely see Larkin finishing this fight late in round 3. So that's a little bit scary, but we have to give the slight edge to Brunson, because I think he could at least push the pace again enough. Maybe I should throw Larkin up against the cage. Larkin likes to have his back against the cage for some reason, and lets people kind of control him in that aspect. And I think Larkin needs to kind of circle out, get his back off the cage, and then unload a little bit. So I think Brunson's going to dictate the pace of the fight, and if his cardio holds up, he should probably get the decision nod. But again, it's a fight that I'm not really confident on. I'm going back and forth with it, because I could also see Larkin striking and his takedown defense come into play here as well. So my final pick will probably be made after the weigh-ins. So check out the MMAOddsBreaker staff selections for that. But for right now, early on, I'm going to lean slightly towards Brunson.
And I'm in agreement. I think that Brunson right now is competing at a higher level than Lorenz Larkin. Larkin entered the UFC with a ton of hype. He was coming off a victory over Robbie Lawler. He'd been looking really good, and he just hasn't really put it together. Whether it's been positioning issues like in the Francis Carmont fight, or pace issues where he came out too slow in the first 2 rounds against Brad Tavares, or chin issues where he got knocked out really quick by Philippou. It's just been a plethora of problems. Brunson has been, the opposite. He's actually looked better and better each time out. That first fight against Levin was pretty ugly in the UFC, but then he looked fantastic getting that quick knockout against Brian Houston. And then in his last fight, even though he lost it, he looked incredible against Yoel Romero. I don't think anybody really expected him to come out the way he did. He took the fight to him, and honestly, he was 1 minute and 37 seconds away from defeating Yoel Romero. And Romero right now is a guy that people are hyping up as, a potential middleweight title contender. So, you gotta factor in that, Brunson took the fight to him and was very close to defeating him. That fight goes 1.5 minutes longer. Maybe we're hyping up Derek Brunson as a top 15 middleweight in the UFC. Now, the differences between these guys, Larkin is the more diverse and technical striker. He has better footwork. He moves around the cage a little quicker, but he's much smaller. And Brunson is aggressive on the feet. He's not as technical, but he has good power, and you got to watch out for that left high kick. He finished Brian Houston with it, and he cracked Romero with it multiple times. So, he really is very good at placing that kick, and he throws it with power and accuracy. He's a pressure-based fighter, so he's going to do a good job of looking for takedowns, trying to put Larkin in the clinch, which has been an issue with Larkin. He gets stuck there, and he'll just try to fight with his back against the fence, and he loses the positioning battle. He's done that multiple times as well. One of the other big things here, obviously, is chin strength. If Brunson can cracks Larkin with something solid, Larkin's going to be in trouble. He's been knocked out twice now, if you go back to the King Mo fight and then this most recent fight. And I think Brunson, while he doesn't quite have the chin problems of Larkin, his isn't great either, and he definitely loses chin durability as the fight goes on, because as Nick mentioned, conditioning is a huge problem for Derek Brunson. That's entirely the reason he lost to Yoel Romero. He just could barely keep his hands up, and Romero was able to knock him out, and Brunson just couldn't continue fighting. So, you gotta watch out. If Brunson does not finish this fight in the first 2 rounds, or if he starts to slow down by the end of that second round after winning the first 2 rounds, maybe live betting, throw something in there on Larkin, because that third round is Derek Brunson's enemy. But regardless, I'm going to pick Derek Brunson. I think that he is fighting at a higher caliber right now, so he's my guy, but you really got to watch out for that conditioning. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, this is definitely a striker versus grappler, and the stats reveal that. Larkin has only attempted one takedown in his career to date, and that's through 70 minutes of fight time. Derek Brunson, on the other hand, he attempts one on average for every minute that he's in the cage. So he is going to be pushing forward and going after takedowns. Lorenz Larkin is going to be trying to avoid those and keep it standing so that he can use his striking. The problem here is that Larkin is at a big size disadvantage. Derek Brunson has long arms, big reach. He's also a southpaw, and his striking stats to date haven't been that bad. For a guy who's supposed to be a wrestler primarily, he's got accurate hands and he has kept up a high pace, at least, as you said, perhaps until the last round when he began to fade. But that gives me some reason to believe that he can stay out of trouble while they're on their feet, keeping his range, keeping out of Larkin's kicking range and striking range. So Derek Brunson is going to be relentless with the takedowns. And while Larkin's takedown defense has been good, there's only so much that you can do when a guy's coming after you with very long arms, getting you against the cage. So I think that Brunson probably grinds this out round to round, and is the round to round winner. But that said, given where the lines are, I think, this is the type of play you attack it from multiple angles because each guy is very clearly defined in how he should win this, if he wins. And so a flyer and Larkin with a knockout or, a specific prop like that, might offset some of the risk. Otherwise, I think I'm leaning Brunson to grind out a victory.
Now, kicking off the pay-per-view main card is a lightweight matchup featuring Yancy Medeiros, who is 9-2 with 1 no contest overall, taking on UFC newcomer Damon Jackson, who is 9-0. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
Medeiros minus 135, Jackson minus 105 was my opening line. Now it's Medeiros minus 115, the comeback on Jackson minus 105. So another spot seems to be the trend on this card. Basically lines got tightened and not a ton of support coming in early for either guy. And I do think this is a very difficult fight. I've been really high on Medeiros, throughout his career, as most of you guys know that. I think the guy has a ton of potential, a ton of talent. And he's just been a disappointment, honestly. So I'm not sure what to think of Medeiros anymore. I know that he's got the skill set to be very effective and do some damage in the UFC lightweight division. The guy has good takedown defense. He's got killer instinct on the feet. He's got a ton of power to go along with it. But the problem is defensively, he obviously is very flawed. So that does kind of make me scratch my head a little bit because, standing up, he's been tagged throughout his short UFC career. And he hasn't looked very good at all. Offensively, like I said, he could dish it out, but he just can't seem to take it as much. So, against a fighter like Jackson, I don't think Jackson is a very complete fighter overall. He's got a well-rounded skill set. He's not going to have to worry as much about the stand-up, even though Jackson's no slouch on the feet, don't get me wrong, but he's still not, I think, as much of a threat as some of the other competition that Medeiros has been facing lately. But getting into Jackson, he has taken this fight on short notice. He usually fights at 145, and this is at 155, so that's one thing to at least consider a little bit, but very solid prospect. He has some hype coming into this UFC debut, and it seems to be real. The guy definitely has an outstanding grappling game, good wrestling. He's just a stud on the ground. If he gets the fight to the floor more times than not, he finishes it. He can drop some nasty ground and pound. He can get positional control, and he'll submit you really quick. Before you even know what happens, the guy's that good on the ground. So Medeiros does not want to tangle with Jackson on the ground at all because it does seem to be Medeiros' flaw is obviously once he's hard to get on his back, but once you do get him there, I think, Medeiros' sub defense is still yet to be determined a little bit. And Jackson is the kind of guy that you don't want to fiddle around with at all when the fight does hit the floor. So this is another tricky spot. I could easily see Jackson maybe, his wrestling's good enough to maybe, get Medeiros on the ground and, finish him off by submission and come in and win his debut and then drop to his natural weight class of 145. But on the other hand, I do see some advantages for Medeiros in this spot. His takedown defense, again, overall has been pretty solid from what we've seen. So if Jackson cannot get Medeiros on the floor, Medeiros is going to have a 4-inch reach advantage on the feet, and he is the better striker. Even though his striking defense is horrible, and scary at times, I still think that he can be the more effective striker because his chin overall seems to be very solid. His body's a little bit questionable, as Miller, kind of showed everybody there. But at the same time, again, he should have the edge on the feet against somebody like Jackson. So this is another fight that I've been going back and forth on, to be honest with you. It's a very tricky one to pick because Jackson has a huge upside and he's got a lot of potential. But I do slightly lean towards Medeiros.
And while I completely agree that Medeiros has some advantages here, especially on the feet and in terms of preparation, things that scare me are his defense. And it's not just striking defense, it's his takedown defense, it's his submission defense, everything in terms of defense. Medeiros is pretty much an offensive threat. And if that offense isn't working, then he's in trouble. Now, if Medeiros is able to get things going on the feet, he could definitely win this fight. He probably will win this fight. Because Damon Jackson is, while he's competent on the feet, he wants to get this fight to the ground. He wants to start dropping ground and pound. He wants to go for a submission. And if he does get it to the ground, then, Jackson's going to be in really good shape. Now, the other big concern, of course, is that Jackson is normally a featherweight. He just defeated Leonard Garcia in Legacy. So, clearly Jackson, he knows what he's doing. He's competent. That's a quality win, especially with the way that Garcia had been fighting lately. But the size disparity. Medeiros is a natural lightweight. Jackson, cuts down to featherweight. Jackson is going to be an inch taller, but in terms of build and strength and everything, Medeiros will have that. So that'll make the takedowns that much more difficult for Jackson because he needs to get this fight to the canvas if he wants to win. Now, on the feet, Medeiros has some really good power. He mixes things up pretty well. He has good kicks, good solid punches, good combinations. He's very dangerous in terms of what he's able to provide offensively. Now, if Jackson isn't able to time a takedown or close the distance, get in the clinch, get this fight to the canvas, then Medeiros could not just win, he could win by knockout. Another thing to be concerned about is with the short notice, Jackson, we don't know how his cardio is. I mean, granted, he won pretty convincingly relatively recently against Garcia, so he should still be in decent fight shape, and he didn't take any damage in that fight, but that is a concern, especially the UFC jitters, a whole bunch of different things in Medeiros' favor, but just the fact that Medeiros has such poor defense overall, I think that Jackson does get this fight to the ground, and I think that Jackson will potentially get a submission victory or maybe even a decision. Who knows? But I'm going to take a flyer on Damon Jackson here, and I think he might be able to pull this off and make one heck of a UFC debut. Now, sticking with the lightweight division, we have Carlos Diego Ferreira, who is 10-0, taking on Ramsey Nijem, who is 10-4. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds makers' perspective on this one?
Ferreira minus 280, the comeback on Nijem plus 200, and finally we have had a little bit of movement on this fight. It's down to minus 220 for Ferreira, and the comeback is plus 180 on Nijem here. This is an interesting fight. I mean, Ferreira has, again, that hype around him. He's a very solid prospect. I mean, he is 29 for a prospect. I know he's getting a little bit older, but still, his performance against Goldsmith was so smooth. And you know what? That's kind of not even a flukish type thing. I mean, that's how good Ferreira is on the ground and his well-rounded skill set. He doesn't have any knockouts on his resume, but the guy definitely has some talent on the feet as well. So he's one of these guys that has some decent wrestling offensively. He can be put on his back, but if he gets put on his back, more times than not, he can scramble out of a bad position and get you in trouble with his sub game. I mean, he's just that lethal on the ground. And on the feet, compared to Nijem might have a little bit more power. He's going to have some confidence coming into this fight for sure, based on his performance last time out. But Ferreira, I think, is a little bit more technical, and he's more capable of actually finishing Nijem there as well. Nijem does have somewhat of a suspect chin. His defense is a little bad. But he keeps on improving his overall game. Nijem is still, I believe, 3 years younger. So there is definitely some room for improvement in Nijem's game, and he is at an all-time high as far as confidence goes and momentum on his side. He definitely has that as well. So I think Nijem is going to be game. He's going to push forward and be aggressive here and come at Ferreira, look to take him down, even maybe look to stand and try to knock him out. But I don't think he's going to have that much success because Nijem typically is one of these guys that, again, is more well known for his wrestling skills. He's more of a grinder. He's got okay submissions. Now his submission defense, I just mentioned his chin is a little suspect. His submission defense is a little suspect as well. So what you have here with Nijem is a good offensive fighter, but defensively, I mean, he definitely lacks. And against a guy like Ferreira, I mean, Ferreira's a sniper in all sorts of ways. Like I said, even though he doesn't have pure knockouts, on his resume, he's definitely capable of finishing on the feet. He's definitely capable of finishing on the ground. And if it does hit the scorecards as well, I think that's kind of Nijem's best path to victory is, maybe grinding out, avoiding the submission and maybe grinding out, Ferreira for a decision win here. That's not totally out of the question, but then again, I would be fairly surprised. I think Ferreira, no matter where this fight takes place, he's going to be a little bit better. And even if it hits a scorecard, he can win there. So I think Ferreira could win by knockout, he can win by sub, and he can win on the cards. So I have to pick him here, and I'm kind of glad that the overall betting action so far has been coming in on Nijem because I really do think that's probably the wrong side here.
And I'm in agreement. I think that Ferreira is the right side as well. You know, he's looked very good before the UFC. His UFC debut was spectacular. That judo throw into the slick transition into the no hooks rear naked choke on Colton Smith was, you know, a thing of beauty. Now, Ramsey Nijem, he's looked really good in his last two fights as well. You know, Justin Edwards was a quality win, and then he absolutely, you know, smashed Beneil Dariush, which caught a lot of people by surprise. You know, Dariush was getting hyped up quite a bit there. And so that is a very interesting dynamic here. It's going to be Ramsey Nijem's forward aggression and Ramsey Nijem's top control and potential ground and pound against Carlos Diego Ferreira's, you know, more composed technique on the feet, Ferreira's judo and overall grappling ability, and then Ferreira's fantastic Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And it's going to be a very interesting dynamic to see how these guys play out against each other. It's a very interesting style matchup. The big thing here, though, is defensively, Nijem definitely has some flaws. His striking defense is not that good, and then when he does get hit, his chin is not very good. And that's a big cause for concern considering how young he is at 26 years old. You know, if he gets clipped in a fight, he's in big, big trouble. Now, in terms of submissions, I mean, we've seen Nijem get caught there as well. Obviously, James Vick was able to put him away very quickly in their fight, very early in the first round. So, you know, Ferreira definitely could lock something on because that guy is extremely technical in terms of his jiu-jitsu. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's aggressive. He's opportunistic. He goes for something the second he sees an opening. So, and Nijem definitely could give him an opening with this aggression that he's been displaying lately. So, very interesting dynamic here. I can see Nijem pursuing the takedown. I don't know if that's really the way he wants to go here. Maybe he wants to get this fight in the clinch. Maybe he wants to stay in open space and just pressure Ferreira. But I really don't like his ways to win here. I think that they put him in too much danger against somebody as solid and well-rounded as Ferreira. And I think that at some point in this fight, either Ferreira's going to crack him with some good punches, or Ferreira's going to catch him in a submission. And I definitely see Ferreira finishing this fight. So my pick is going to be Carlos Diego Ferreira. Now dropping down to the women's bantamweight division, we have Bethe Correia, who is unbeaten at 8-0 overall, taking on longtime veteran Shayna Baszler, who is 15-8. Now Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Correia, minus 160, the comeback on Baszler, plus 120 was the opening number, and Correia now is minus 135, the comeback is plus 115. So again, not a tremendous amount of action either way on this fight. It has bounced up and down a little bit. It's another tough one to call. I mean, Correia has looked pretty solid, so far in her UFC career. I mean, no question about it. She's beaten some kind of quality competition. I mean, her win against Jessamine Duke last time out doesn't look as impressive at this point, but still, Correia can definitely show you what she's made of as far as pushing the pace of a fight. Has pretty decent takedown defense overall. Her aggression, her skill set overall is pretty good. I mean, she has the will to win. She keeps on improving. And I mean, you can notice a difference of her game improvement, just in a couple fights from the UFC as well. So Correia, I'm expecting the best version of her yet to come out in this fight here, but she's kind of probably needed. I mean, Baszler is one of these ladies that has been around for a long time. So she's a veteran of the sport. She's finally getting her opportunity, of course, in the UFC. I know she had a setback against Pena in the Ultimate Fighter, which a lot of people at that time were very surprised. Baszler was definitely the favorite going into that fight against Pena in the Ultimate Fighter, but give Pena credit, she deserved to get that W. Now Baszler, the problem with Baszler for me is, I mean, she is getting to be a little bit old now. She's 34 years old as far as fight years go, so she's creeping up there in age a little bit. And if you look at her last few performances, including that tough performance, she hasn't looked as good as she once was, so there could be a little bit of a decline in Baszler. And if that's the case, then maybe Correia is catching her at the proper time. But overall skill set for skill set, I definitely think Baszler's the better fighter. Even on the feet, I think she can hang with Correia. Correia might have the edge. She's going to have some aggression and again pushing forward a little bit. She's younger, a little bit younger, fresher, but I still think Baszler can even hang and manage to do some damage a little bit on the feet, but that's not where she wants to take the fight. She definitely wants to get the fight to the floor, and if she's able to get Correia down, I mean, there's no question in my mind that she can do some damage on the ground, probably even get the submission. I mean, she's very slick on the ground with her submissions, and that's really where she excels at. And Correia, I don't think she's ever come close to facing a girl as talented as Baszler on the ground, so I think that's probably what we're going to see happen here. I mean, again, this is another fight that I've been kind of going back and forth on, because I do think if the fight hits the scorecards, I can see Correia winning. But if it doesn't hit the scorecards and if there's a finish inside, I could see it being Baszler by submission more than anything else probably. So I'm probably going to go with the underdog pick here. Again, not a ton of confidence, because if Baszler does have that kind of decline that I'm talking about, then she can easily lose this fight. So not a whole lot of stock in it, but at the same time, I do think that it's Baszler's kind of fight to win or lose. If she can get the fight to the floor and implement her submission game plan, I think she's going to probably pull off a successful UFC debut, official UFC debut, I should say. If not, it might be a long night for her, and she could get grinded out and just outpointed by Correia on the feet, maybe even finished. I mean, Baszler has been knocked out 3 times. Correia doesn't have a ton of knockout power, but she is improving her overall game. She's becoming more aggressive, and if that decline is true, she could get knocked out as well. So another tough one to call, but I mean, skill set for skill set, I honestly got to just go with my head and go with a better overall fighter, and that should be Baszler in this spot. But again, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Correia does pull off the upset, but my official pick at this point is going to be Baszler.
And I'm going to go with the other side. People are kind of hyping up Correia as this 4 horseman killer, and especially after her last fight against Jessamine Duke, which was extremely one-sided. But who knows? I mean, Correia's actually looked pretty competent in her UFC stint so far. She's 2-0, has a quality win over Julie Kedzie, and then obviously the aforementioned Jessamine Duke fight. Baszler, on the other hand, while at one point she was one of the top women bantamweights on the planet, I mean, clearly she is a special grappler. The problem for me is she just does not really have that same ability anymore. It's starting to slow down. She's 34 years old, and she's been finished in 2 of her last 3 fights, I believe. You know, she lost by stoppage to Alexis Davis. She got finished by Juliana Pena on the show. Her only win in that time period was the fight to get into the house against Colleen Schneider, which, you know, she looked really good in. And the biggest problem with Baszler right now is she seems more of a front runner. She comes out really strong. She's got great offensive grappling. She's extremely slick on the canvas. Great transitions. She will dive on all kinds of submissions, and she can get them against a lot of people. But if she doesn't, and if she doesn't get the finish, she's in trouble. Her pace slows down. It didn't always happen. I mean, she had a competitive fight against Sarah McMahon for 3 rounds just a couple years ago, but now it just feels like, you know, injuries are starting to take their toll. You know, her knees are completely taped up and wrapped up and everything. She's just doesn't quite have that same movement and ability and quickness, and it definitely is catching up to her. So if she doesn't get that quick finish, then it's going to be very difficult for her to win a decision, and she definitely could slow down enough to get finished, just like in the Pena fight, just like in the Alexis Davis fight. Now, Correia, while she's not a world beater by any stretch of the imagination, she is competent. She's a pretty solid stand-up fighter. She isn't the type that's gonna, get a stoppage. She doesn't have a lot of knockout power. She's more of a point scorer. She pitter-patters her way through rounds, but she outstrikes her opponents. She pushes forward. She has pretty good defense, and she's pretty accurate. So, she's just gonna score and score and score, and then eventually win a judge's decision. That's how she's won her first 2 UFC fights. And I can see her doing the same thing. I can also see Shayna Baszler just taking her down right away and just trucking her with, overwhelming, submission grappling and catch wrestling. But I really, more often than not, I see Correia weathering that early storm and then winning a decision, especially the last 2 rounds. So my pick's going to be Bethe Correia, and I think she continues her momentum here in the UFC women's bantamweight division. Now moving on to the co-main event of the evening, we have a lightweight contest featuring Tony Ferguson, who is 16-3 overall, taking on Danny Castillo, who is 17-6. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Ferguson opens minus 265, Castillo plus 185, and this is a line that didn't get a ton of movement early on. Right now it's Ferguson minus 245, Castillo's plus 205, so it dropped a little bit, but basically, again, it just tightened up. So there's two-way support on this fight, and you got 2 very quality lightweights in this scrap, so it should be a fun fight. I do give the advantage to Ferguson, though, in several areas. I mean, pure wrestling, you'd have to give the edge to Castillo as far as grappling ability goes. Pure grinding type of style again, but Ferguson, as far as pure jiu-jitsu goes, I do give that edge to him. I mean, as far as BJJ, he's definitely a finisher capable of submitting people. Well, not that Castillo is not, but I think there's a significant edge in pure submission skill for Ferguson in this fight, and a kind of a slight edge in Castillo's wrestling, but Ferguson does have good takedown defense, so this should actually play out on the feet more so than not. And I think on the feet, Ferguson has a big advantage. Castillo doesn't have bad hands, he doesn't have bad striking overall, he's got some power to go along with it, but he's going to be outclassed by Ferguson on the feet. Ferguson's going to have 5 inches of reach, and he knows how to use it. I mean, the guy definitely, he throws a more varied attack at you, he can knock you out with his kicks, he can knock you out, and he's pretty accurate when it comes to landing that knockout blow as well. He's got the killer instinct. So really, I do think it's Ferguson's fight to win or lose here. If he can avoid being put on his back and kind of smothered or controlled by Castillo, I think he's probably going to win it. Now again, he's got to be cautious on the feet because Castillo does have power, which I just mentioned, but I do think that if it stays on the feet and it becomes a firefight, Ferguson's going to torch him. So I don't like the fact also that Castillo is getting up there a little bit in age. He's 35 years old. Ferguson's a little bit younger and fresher at 30. So I think there's more of an upside to Ferguson still, and he can kind of make a run towards that lightweight title. He's definitely a well-rounded fighter, and he's capable of doing that. So my lean is going to be Ferguson.
And I'm in agreement. You brought up the stat that I'm keying on is 35 to 30, 5-year age gap, and especially at 35 years old, that lightweight and lower fighters really start to deteriorate. I mean, we saw it with Gray Maynard. Just kind of dropped from number 2 fighter in the world all the way down to potentially being done in just a matter of 3 or 4 fights. Now, the big difference here for me is striking. Castillo is more of a single punch guy. He's got big power in his right hand, but he doesn't really throw his punches in combination. He doesn't really throw a lot of kicks in combination. So unless he lands that one big shot, then he's probably going to lose the stand-up portion of the fight. But again, that one big shot is dangerous. I mean, you saw it against Edson Barboza when he almost finished him in the first round. You saw it against Charlie Brenneman in his last fight where he just completely ended the fight in one strike. So that one-punch power is something you really have to be careful about, especially for Ferguson, who, while he employs a very long reach, he does not use very good striking defense. He gets caught with punches pretty well, although his chin has held up so far throughout his career. Now, Ferguson, on top of having the good reach, his left jab is very good. I wish he used it more, but when he does throw it, I mean, it really can stifle opponents. And he follows that up with big power in his right hand as well, just like Castillo, except his reach is longer, so he can throw it from a safer distance. And it's very, very dangerous. When you saw in his last fight, I mean, he just tattooed Kikuno on the feet. And he's not just a one-dimensional striker. He throws a really good left body kicks. One thing that I am a little concerned about with Castillo, or with Ferguson, is he's a little reckless on the ground. He sees submissions and he just dives on them, and he doesn't care about surrendering position. And against somebody like Danny Castillo, who has not been submitted in a really, really long time, his entire UFC career dates back all the way to the early WEC days when he was last submitted. If Ferguson dives on like an arm bar or something, more of a basic submission, I can definitely see Castillo getting top position. And Castillo's pretty dangerous from there. He's not a big finisher from top position, but he's a good wrestler. He controls, and he can win fights with his wrestling. That's another thing. If Castillo, things aren't going well for him on the feet, he will probably revert to being that wrestler and shoot in for takedowns. Although Ferguson has pretty good takedown defense, he's a pretty solid wrestler in his own right, has a good collegiate history, and that's basically what this fight boils down to. The one last thing you really got to pay attention to is chin strength. And as I mentioned, Ferguson, his chin has held up throughout his entire career. Castillo has not. He's been hurt multiple times. He's been knocked out by Anthony Pettis. He's been knocked out by Michael Johnson, and he's been hurt before as well. So against a big power striker like Tony Ferguson, you've got to keep an eye on that chin. So even though he's fighting in his hometown, Castillo might be sending some of those hometown fans back home unhappy. So I'm going to pick Tony Ferguson, but you got to watch out for that striking defense from Ferguson as well. But my pick is Tony Ferguson. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, the stats support that. Obviously, you mentioned the tail of the tape. Ferguson has two big advantages. He's got a huge reach advantage, 5 inches, and also a youth advantage. And that is significant in this fight. I think specifically it is significant. And so then you look at the striking stats. Ferguson keeps a very high pace, which with the reach advantage is going to be very useful against keeping Castillo at bay. On the flip side, you got Castillo's wrestling, which is definitely a strength for him, but the takedown defense for Ferguson is currently 100%. He has yet to be or is yet to be taken down. He's taken other people down and actually been flipped around, so he doesn't have a perfect ground control stat, but it's still pretty high. So both these guys have a high ground control share. It's just that Castillo is more likely to be the one initiating that than Ferguson. So can Castillo get this down? Can he stay out of trouble? The numbers are certainly not aligned for that, so I definitely support Ferguson as the odds favorite. And you mentioned the chin as well, so Ferguson actually has the sloppier head strike defense, but when he gets hit, he's able to absorb it. On the flip side, Castillo rarely gets hit, but when he does, he has suffered knockdowns at a very above average rate, and so that's a big concern for him. So other areas kind of even out in terms of what they do in total, in terms of how much punishment they dish out versus absorb. But there's definitely some striking mismatches here. And with the size that Ferguson is going to have and the youthfulness and the stronger chin, that could be a bad night for Danny.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now moving on to the main event of the evening, we have a UFC bantamweight title fight between current champion TJ Dillashaw, who is 11-2 overall, taking on the man he dethroned in a rematch, Barao, who is 34-2 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Dillashaw -135, the comeback on Barao -105. Not an easy line to set. I mean, considering their last line, when it closed, it was around -1200 at some spots, 10-1 at some spots. So it was a ridiculous line out there. But look how Dillashaw performed overall. I mean, he performed fantastic. So right now, at the time of the recording, actually, it's Dillashaw -145, the comeback on Barao's +125. And this line did bounce up a little bit more. At one point now, action's starting to come back in on Barao. So tricky line to set. There is some support on both of these guys, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the line keep on dropping because, again, I think most people out there believe that the first fight was kind of a fluke. Dillashaw caught him early, and it kind of dictated the tempo of the fight the rest of the way. I'm not too sure about that. I think Dillashaw, the way he moves on the feet, stylistically is just a better fighter than Barao as far as matchup wise goes. I think he's a difficult style matchup for Barao to kind of hang with or match up with. I know Barao was competitive in the fight in some ways, and I know he probably will be more competitive in this fight, and he's very dangerous, and you know what he brings to the table. Look at his, resume speaks for itself. There's no doubt about it. He's beaten the who's who in the UFC at 135, it seems, and the guy's very dangerous everywhere the fight takes place. He can beat you on the feet by outpointing you. He can knock you out. The guy can submit you. He's got good takedown defense, nasty leg kicks, everything. I mean, Barao is a very talented champion, but I think he has met his match. I mean, Dillashaw keeps on continuing to improve. A lot of people didn't believe that Dillashaw could get the job done last time because he's had a couple questionable, iffy bouts. I mean, if you look at it, he was knocked out by Dotson, which is now a 125 pounder. So facing the man in Barao at that point, it wasn't a good matchup for him, a lot of people thought. But again, I think the improvement levels of Dillashaw is pretty much evident. I mean, he keeps on, from fight to fight, he keeps on getting more confidence in his stand-up. I mean, we all know his wrestling is where it's at for Dillashaw. I mean, that's kind of what led him to success and got him where he's at right now. His ability to, again, dictate where the fight goes, take people down, control them. His submission game's improved. Just your typical alpha male fighter that has an outstanding wrestling base, but his stand-up improves and he can be dangerous enough to be a title contender. That's exactly what happened. But his confidence is at an all-time high. I mean, he was confident going into his last fight with Barao. He said that, and obviously it came true. I mean, he wasn't intimidated at all by Barao. Now this time, I think he's going to have even more confidence. He knows that, I mean, stylistically, again, he just matched Barao in their first fight, and I think this time he's going to be confident enough to know what he can do, know that he's what he's capable of. He's been training very hard. The guy looks good. I mean, the fight hasn't really taken place. I know we were talking about this a little bit off air with Brian as well, and this wasn't too long ago that they just fought. So I'm not sure that Barao kind of had enough time to kind of rebound and kind of find himself again before he goes into this matchup. So I think there's a lot of advantages pointing at Dillashaw. I think he could basically repeat the same type of performance that he did in the first fight. He's dominant. I mean, maybe Barao's going to come in, of course, to get his belt back. He's going to be hungry. He's going to be ready to go, but I still think Dillashaw finds a way to win. Maybe not by knockout this time. I think he could possibly grind him out, or, maybe not by takedowns, but again, dictating the tempo of the fight and being a little bit more active and hard to hit on the feet. So I think Dillashaw wins this fight again, and there could very well be some value at the current line as well.
And I agree that this was not a fluke in that last fight. A fluke is when, some guy just gets clipped early and then the fight's over. This was a fight where TJ Dillashaw, he did land a nice shot in the first round, but he just beat up Renan Barao for 4 straight rounds before getting that finish. It was an absolute one-sided shellacking. Really, the only time Renan Barao was even in that fight was the first minute or two. And, looking back at their overall skill sets, Dillashaw's stand-up has come a long way ever since, it was already starting to get good. He was focusing on becoming more of a stand-up striker. But, with the inclusion of Dwayne Bang Ludwig for a while, that really took his striking to the next level, and he was very composed in there, had great movement, good footwork. He was doing everything right against Barao. He was just overwhelming him with pure pressure and volume. And, Barao, he is a very good striker. He has power. He's explosive, but he's not the type of guy that really puts the big combinations together. And he definitely got, seriously surprised by Dillashaw, so it'll be very interesting to see how he adapts to that last fight, because he definitely got caught off guard. Now, he can say that he got injured, he can say whatever, the fight got changed from the first round, but that doesn't change the fact that not only did he get dominated in that last fight, he's not getting a whole lot of time to recover and improve and make a new game plan for this fighting. This is only a little over 3 months since the last time they fought. Sometimes guys, when they get knocked out and beat up as badly as Barao did, they get suspended for longer than that. So I'm actually very surprised how quickly they're doing this turnaround and this rematch. Now, in terms of more skills that balance each other out, Dillashaw obviously has the great wrestling to fall back on, but he clearly does not want to use that because Barao is an extremely accomplished grappler. He is fantastic at transitioning. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills are off the charts. He's one of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu players in the bantamweight division. His back takes are fantastic. His transitions on the ground are just super slick. So I think basically the game plan for this fight is Dillashaw to just try to make history repeat itself and try to beat up Renan Barao on the feet. Because Barao, it wasn't the first time that Barao's ever been hurt. Michael McDonald hurt him on the feet as well in their title fight. Now, Barao could come back and have a better game plan. Nuva União is a fantastic gym, and those guys are terrific coaches, so I'm sure they're going to be prepared. But, man, I can't see how Renan Barao can respond this quickly without getting a tune-up fight or something to get his confidence back, because that wasn't just a losing fight. That was a beatdown. And I think it could happen again. So my pick's going to be TJ Dillashaw to retain his title. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, they're in agreement. And when you look down the line and compare the two guys head to head, even in the last fight, TJ's performance metrics were actually superior by a little bit, not a lot, but all the way down the board. And now they're actually even better because we've thrown in another 20 some minutes of their fight time together, and Dillashaw was winning round to round in addition to eventually getting the finish. So, Dillashaw is the more accurate striker. He is punch for punch the more powerful striker in terms of causing knockdowns. It's only a little difference, but we talk about Renan Barrao's power. Dillashaw has it too. And then, in terms of pace, they're actually fairly equal, but in defense, Dillashaw has another edge. So you throw in his wrestling ability to try to keep this standing, which he was able to do in the first fight. And when these guys are exchanging, Dillashaw has proven to be the more efficient guy. He's simply dishing out more punishment than he takes. And I do expect that to be the case again. So, you look back through UFC history, according to at least the odds that are used, by Fight Metric that tracks all UFC data, this is the biggest title fight upset that we had in the UFC, was Dillashaw defeating Barao the first time. And so now he's a very slight favorite, and I gotta lean his way on this. He proved that he has the stamina. He proved that he has the finishing power. And he proved that he can do it round to round and simply dominate the fight. So, I see no reason why to pick against the champ.
So that'll do it for our full event breakdown for UFC 177. Part 2 of the Premium Oddscast featuring our premium bets will be out Friday night around 8 p.m. Eastern Time, so stay tuned for that if you're an MMAOddsBreaker.com premium member. Now, if we have a free play to give out, make sure to follow at Premium Oddscast on Twitter or at MMAOB_premium, because that's where we'll post them first. We can also notify you of our free bets via email if you prefer that method. Just send an email to picks@MMAOddsBreaker.com and we'll add you to our free bet mailing list. Also, feel free to like our Premium Oddscast Facebook page. We post articles, show announcements, and plenty of other information there, so you can stay up to date on everything from us if you're interested. Special thanks to our sponsor, 5 Dimes. Good luck, everyone, and hopefully the betting gods are on your side this weekend.